You can skip to whatever section of the video you'd like to watch on the timeline below. I want to quickly touch on the pain points for Frost that still exist in this tree. And the major one that I want to talk about, there's two major ones, but the first one is going to be improved Blizzard. I do think that where this is stationed on the tree is a problem, because as of right now it's a choice node between if you're ever going to cast Blizzard versus if you're not going to cast Blizzard, because you just need this for Frozen Orb to do any sort of sustained damage in AoE. But the thing that I do want to talk about is the actual cooldown reduction value. It's at 0.3 seconds, which is less than what the value has been for the past like 8 years, essentially. The value was changed from 0.5 to 0.25 in our 9.1.5 to 9.2 nerf. And the reason that this was nerfed doesn't exist anymore. It was nerfed because you were generating too many runes of power in AoE, and that's no longer a problem because you can't generate Icy Propulsion cooldown reduction from Frozen Orb. So we took a major kind of quality of life hit from this, especially at low target cleave with the cooldown reduction our Frozen Orb was giving us. It went from giving us 9 seconds of cooldown reduction on Frozen Orb on 2 targets to 4.5 seconds, which was not, just you didn't cast on 2 targets, and we dodged a lot of that 2 target cleave nerf just by swapping a Necro with Slick Ice, so it might seem like this didn't impact us at all, but it was over a 10% nerf to our cleave normally. I would really like to see this bumped back up to 0.5 like it was for the, 8 years before 9.1.5 where we scale out of control. So hopefully that's something that can change in a tuning pass. And then Arctic Piercing, in my opinion, is a very problematic talent because it makes playing an active talent like Glacial Spike, like Ray of Frost, like Evan Bolt very challenging, because if you do, it'll just fall off. Even if you are doing the standard Shadowlands rotation, this buff can still, if you're unlucky with your RNG, fall off. It's a maintenance buff that we won't really be paying attention to. It's required to get Bone Chilling, which is one of only 2 talents that actually increase the damage of Glacial Spike. But if you play with this with Glacial Spike, it will literally have a 10% uptime. You can see that in the gameplay footage that I have later. I think this is a really problematic talent. I don't really see that, how it contributes kind of to the gameplay. Even with a Frostbolt spam build, you still won't have 100% uptime on this. I think it's kind of degenerate, and it adds more downtime issues that we just kind of fix with the Icy Propulsion change. So I'd really like for this to potentially get redesigned or removed, and I do think that, moving Freezing Cold kind of in here as more of a frost-oriented talent might be pretty nice as well. So yeah, those are the major pain points I wanted to touch on before we get into just kind of talking about the mage builds. I do think that Freezing Cold sounds really interesting, pretty synergistic with Snowstorm, but this will probably have the same problem as Grizzly Icicle, where it breaks from your teammate's damage, which makes this not very useful. So I would potentially suggest that this be changed to Winter's Chill, even though that is a passive that's technically frost only. It's shatter without the root effect, so you could still, theoretically shatter a lot of abilities as fire and arcane, and that would be really cool to have that added complexity to the AoE rotation for those specs. So, all right, I'm going to get into talking about the talents now. So I built out 3 different talent builds for Frost. I'm going to talk about the Shadowlands talent build, the kind of AoE sustained talent build, and then a Glacial Spike build. So here we have just the Shadowlands single target build. You can see this is kind of standard. You're just playing exactly like you were in Shadowlands with a couple more passive damage increases like Arctic Piercing, like Deep Shatter. The only functional gameplay change that you're going to have is Ray of Frost. I took this instead of Comet Storm simply because it will most likely proc Icy Propulsion. At the moment on Alpha, it actually does not proc Icy Propulsion. But Ray of Frost, similar to Comet Storm, is whitelisted on Winter's Chill, so you can get a full channel of it with it critting, which is really nice. Hopefully this is changed to work with Icy Propulsion, because it is, single target only. So this is just a Shadowlands build. Nothing really changes from Shadowlands. It looks nice. Probably still fun in single target. You just have way more icicle generation, which is a lot of Icy Propulsion cooldown reduction. And this is the single target build that I think you would take kind of as a general one. There's a choice between Temporal Anomaly and Time Warp here as well, which I won't really get into. But you take Meteor because you can Shatter Meteor, and it's kind of just a spell you're going to press, I guess. But I'm not sure actually if it's whitelisted or not. I'm not going to talk about the rotation changes for it though. And then Time Nolly has some problems, but I'll probably mention at the end of the video because I don't want to make this too long for people that are just looking for, interesting things. So they did add displacement back called Reflection, and we do still have Master Time, but in a more convenient place. This is actually a major problem in the Mage's general tree, and in my opinion, it's obviously not a problem because it's bad. It's actually just too strong. So I'm gonna throw in a clip of a Mage with this amount of mobility and how many blinks he's able to do. All right, now that we're back from that, we'll start talking about some of the other talent things. One important thing to mention is I did take Energized Barriers. This, even though it says melee attacks, is often procced by a lot of kind of AoE physical damage from bosses. Think like the slam on the gargoyles on Sun King's Salvation that would proc this. It procs like the Moonkin one. So it could have some niche uses in Raid. Otherwise, you just would never take this unless you're doing PvP or, potentially some open world stuff, which is fine. This is what I think of more as the sustained damage profile. And so this build kind of has two uses. And what that's going to look like is with the changes that they did, removing the point reductions, right, to make everything 2 points instead of 3 points, you can actually now get 3 capstones. So this is what a potential cold front build could look like. Getting both Slick Ice and Thermal Void being very strong, and then you can get Deep Shatter. You can see the change that I made was to go down this road to get I'm missing one thing, but you can go down this way and get Spleen Ice as well if you didn't want to get Slick Ice if that wasn't as important. But I'm just assuming that would be synergistic with Fractured Frost. It is important to note that Fractured Frost does not generate any additional resources. It doesn't generate more icicles, and it doesn't increase your proc chance, because it's hitting multiple targets. So whether or not that makes it strong enough to be competitive in AoE over our more single target nature thing or over my next build, which is going to be Glacial Spike, can't really say. For this build, I did go Incanter's Flow because with Icy Propulsion only being single target spells, you will be getting far less resets, and this is a very consistent damage focused thing. Of course, this choice between Incanter's Flow and Root Power is kind of just going to be a simmed choice. As for the AoE changes, you'll be going Shifting Power because it's strong in AoE, and Freezing Cold, will be strong if it actually works like it says and your group members wouldn't break it. If your group members do break it, you'll just never take it. So, yeah. It is worth noting this time manipulation does reduce the cooldown of kind of cold, which, doesn't actually have any application with Snowstorm because Snowstorm takes a ridiculously long time to stack up. Kind of unfortunate, but is what it is. Now, talking about Glacial Spike, this is actually in a better spot than I think it was, or than I used to think it was. And there's multiple different things that you can do here. This is an AoE focused build, right? So I've improved Blizzard Talented, and you can choose either Slick Ice for probably single target, low target cleave versus Freezing Winds. And the main difference for this choice is really, or the main reason why I personally think Freezing Winds is better is Hailstones, of course, causes Ice Lance to generate an Icicle every time you Ice Lance. So you'll be getting a huge amount of Glacial Spike generation with Freezing Winds, and I will show you some gameplay in a second here of Glacial Spike with this build. So this just is great burst at the start packs. You open with a Frozen Orb, Ice Lance a couple times, into a Glacial Spike, into some more Ice Lances, and you're just going right back into another Glacial Spike. It's pretty insane. So this does look quite fun. Good job on the build. Good job on the build. It is unfortunate, what you have to give up to get Spleen Ice, but you can't get Snowstorm or whatnot, but you're not really giving up too much for Glacial Spike for this build, so looking good. And you would, probably still run a similar AoE focus playstyle. So now I'm going to show you a clip from forgyy. He plays in Incarnate, which is a Hall of Fame guild. He's a fire mage, one of the best fire mages in the world. I'll link his Twitch in the description and in a pinned comment because, gave me this gameplay, or let me use it, I suppose. So yeah, he streams this raid very often if you ever want to watch a top tier fire mage play. The main thing I wanted to point out with this gameplay is that even with using ice lances consistently, you are just kind of slamming a lot of glacial spikes, which has the potential to be quite powerful in high haste windows. Of course, on alpha, using template characters, people have very low haste, so this doesn't look great since it's done at 8% based haste, plus the added modifiers, but whatever. Looks fun.